Hello and welcome to Insights with me, Lynne O'Donnell. I'm talking with Sima Samar, an extraordinary person with an extraordinary story to tell. She's just written a book called Outspoken: My Fight for Freedom and Human Rights in Afghanistan. She lives in exile now in the United States, but her fight for her people, and especially the women of Afghanistan, goes on. Have a listen. You're a doctor, a woman, a Hazara, an advocate for human rights and women's rights. You served in Afghanistan's Republic government as Minister of Women's Affairs and as chairperson of the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission. And you've written an autobiography just released called Outspoken: My Fight for Freedom and Human Rights in Afghanistan. Welcome, Dr. Samar. Your book is a page-turning read and has been released to coincide with the third anniversary of the collapse of Afghanistan's republic in 2021. It's been a long fight, and one that started for you well before the Taliban took power in Afghanistan for the first time in 1996. Can you start by telling me where for you it all began?
Thank you, and good morning to you, and I hope the people who listen to your program would like the whole program. Yes, I am a woman in Afghanistan, and I feel belonging to humanity and the female part of the humanity. And I'm Hazara ethnicity in Afghanistan, ethnic group in Afghanistan. And of course, Hazara is one of the most prosecuted ethnic group in Afghanistan. And yes, I'm a medical doctor, but I really tried hard to reach to that point in order to be able to get my education. And I would say that Afghanistan was a poor country, and it is very much conservative, patriarchal society. But we never saw this kind of complete eraser of women from the public life and from the almost from every part of the life, from socio-economic, political life in Afghanistan. But I have to say that remember that the war began in Afghanistan after the coup d'etat in 1978, and then the invasion of USSR in Afghanistan in 1979. Now people are only focusing on the Taliban, but I think that war, when it began after the 1978 coup d'etat in Afghanistan, continued with different political party, and also misuse of the religion and culture in Afghanistan as a weapon of war by one side and the other side. So we actually, the Afghan people, were stuck, or we caught between the USSR left opinion and also by the people who wanted to support the right wing, or use the religion as a weapon of war in order to promote, restrict rule of Islam, which is not Islamic, because the religion Islam is used as a weapon of war. So we end up with the Mujahideen, although I would say that the Mujahideen partially fought against the Russian, which is, we all cannot ignore it. But unfortunately, they brought a lot of destruction and infighting and distinction between the people in Afghanistan. We end up with a group of Taliban. These are who were very young Afghan children who were denied the formal education, and took them because of the poverty of our people. They took them to the madrasas and they brainwashed over there. And now we have them in power.
And once again, religion is being wielded against the people. Can you explain a little more what it is you mean by the use of religion as a weapon of war? How does that manifest?
Yeah. Because the USSR, when they invaded Afghanistan, the reason was to go to the south and reach to the water. It was not only to occupy Afghanistan. The actual aim of the USSR was that. And then the Western countries really tried to stop the improvement or the advancement of the USSR to more to the South Asia. And they looked at it, what can be used in order to stop the so-called communism? Of course, the religion. And they use Islam as a tool and promote and actually choose the most conservative group of people and train them, funded them to fight against the USSR, to stop USSR. And we were able to stop USSR. And when I say we, because it was not only the one who were the trained and the extreme fundamentalist Muslims, but it was the people of Afghanistan who fought, including with them, who fought against the USSR. We were able to push the USSR out after 10 years being in Afghanistan with 150,000 soldiers, with a lot of violent, discriminatory bombing of different villages and killing people and destroying the whole village, destroying the water points, destroying the livestock of the people. End up with a lot of refugees in Pakistan and Iran. And of course, the other side who wanted to stop the advancement of the USSR, they choose those conservative group of people and supported them and made them actually to give them a lot of weapon and money and train them to support the people of Afghanistan struggle against the USSR. So then they actually denied, because they wanted a green belt in that part of Asia to stop the advancement of the USSR to South Asia more. That's why the Iranian Islamic Revolution were allowed and it's happened. And then we had the Islamization of Pakistan, of Ziaul-Haq in Pakistan. And then the Afghan children, unfortunately, because of poverty that the people were facing, they took the children and established those madrasas. I think those madrasas brainwashed the Afghan children and Pakistani children. So they are, the Pakistani Taliban are also the product of those madrasas, which was funded, unfortunately, by Western countries and Arab countries.
Indeed. So it must seem like the situation for Afghanistan has come, well, almost full circle from the relative optimism, I guess, that came after the Taliban were forced from power in 2001. What went wrong?
And in 2001, unfortunately, after the Taliban took most of Afghanistan turned to be the biggest producer of opium in the world. And also Afghanistan became the training camp for the different groups. Remember, Al-Qaeda was established when the Taliban were in Afghanistan. And also Afghanistan became the biggest prison for women. I mean, a prison without wall, I would say. So then what was happened, the 9/11 was happened in 2001. And then on that time, bin Laden, the Al-Qaeda leader, was in Afghanistan. So they asked from Taliban to hand over the leader of Al-Qaeda to them. But then the Taliban were, I don't know, were reluctant or didn't. They said that because of our culture, we don't really, hospitality that we have in Afghanistan, we don't hand over our guests to a foreign power or foreign country. So then the attack was happened. the military invasion in Afghanistan was happened and Taliban were removed from the position for power in 2001. Late 2001, it was end of October, early December, actually. And then the international community started to have a meeting in Bonn, in Germany. They came up with an agreement, and they established the interim government and then the transitional government in Afghanistan. But in last 20, the international community forces, the NATO forces, I would say, stayed for 20 years in Afghanistan. We achieved a lot. But with all those sacrifices and the amount of money that we spend, we could have done much better if there was a proper strategy. Unfortunately, there were no long-term strategy. It was kind of a reactionary action by daily basis, what comes, not really a long-term strategy to build the system and to build the rule of law in the country and really promote accountability and justice. I personally believe that we did not take accountability and justice in Afghanistan seriously. That's why one of the reasons of collapse, I believe, is that because accountability and justice, not only for killing people, not only for destroying the villages of Afghanistan or disappearing thousands and thousands of Afghan people, but also for corruption, for nepotism, for a lot of other issues that was going on in Afghanistan.
Yes, there was a prevailing impunity, wasn't there? But you must see, I suppose, and reading your book, that's certainly the impression that I get, a lot of similarities between what's happening now and what you lived through in the Taliban 1.0 phase, if you like. So let's talk about policy, impunity, collusion, if you like, and apologism post 2021. How do you square the circle? Like I said, I read, and when you were describing what was going on in the early stages of in the mid 1990s, even during the Civil War, through the Taliban's first incarnation, the attitude of the international community, policies, the UN's presence there, so much of it seemed to be déjà vu. What's your view?
Well, unfortunately, the history repeats itself. When they started, I mean, I am in favor of negotiation and dialogue rather than using violence and using bombs and guns and so on. But I think when they started the dialogue with the Taliban, they didn't included the people of Afghanistan. The people of Afghanistan should have been included. And I would also blame the leadership in Afghanistan that was not able to manage the whole peace dialogue with the Taliban. And I think it's kind of, as I said, there were no long-term strategy that what they should do, because it's easy to start a war and conflict in country, but it's not easy to end. So the conflict is not going to end with deadline. We see it now in Gaza, we see it in Ukraine, we see it in Sudan, unfortunately, in Myanmar, you name it, in those countries. So in the way they handled the whole peace process was I think was a failure, and it was incomplete, I would say, because they didn't include the people, they didn't include the Afghan government, and it was more of the personal differences between Dr. Ghani, the president of Afghanistan, and also Zalmay Khalilzad. So we end up with this policy, signing the agreement in 2020, in February 29, 2020. And you can see at the 4-page of the agreement, which was signed between Khalilzad and Mullah Brother in Qatar, there's no word on women. The word woman is not there. And human rights has not been mentioned. And I believe that when you ignore human rights, when you ignore half of the population, that is not peace. That is a political deal. And I did say that before the deal was signed. And we did actually, I was still the chairperson of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission. We did a national inquiry on women, peace, and security. We came up with some recommendation. Nobody actually was listening. So that is the overall withdrawal, which was a disaster again. And see what's happened. We were saying that the Taliban did not change because they never said what is their strategy and policy towards women. And they will keep saying that we learned from our mistake, we changed. What they learned from their mistake, they use the social media, they use the internet, they use the media. They were not allowing the television before. They were not allowing photographing and filming before, but this time they are using for their own benefit. So that is the situation, I think. And it's very, very unfortunate. It's a collective failure of everyone. And my concern is that we all trying to deny the problem in Afghanistan, and that is not going to help anyone.
But the denial began even before the collapse of the republic, didn't it? We heard generals and senior politicians saying that this was a different Taliban. This was Taliban 2.0. They're just boys from the country. They'll be fine. We can work with this incarnation of the Taliban. Whereas people like you knew. Anyone who knew just wasn't listened to. You saw what was coming. You'd been there before, and you knew that, okay, embroidering the situation with new media, with social media, with a public relations campaign wasn't going to change the reality. And that's what's been rolled out for the last 3 years from day one. So let's talk about specifically about the impact on women, domestic violence, child marriage, health, not just access to doctors, clinics and hospitals, but things like vitamin D deprivation. I mean, these are the fundamental things that really were one of the amongst the achievements of the 20 years of the Republic, even if they didn't stick. How would you describe the impact on women in Afghanistan of the return of the Taliban as a regime?
Yeah, I think the complete gender apartheid is applied on women in Afghanistan. It is systematic, it's organized, it's continue to be the segregation. So what is apartheid? The definition of apartheid, which was coming from South Africa because of racial apartheid. So this is gender apartheid. They removed practically all female member of the society from the public life. So imagine girls are not allowed to get education beyond 6th grade. No other Islamic country does that. Afghanistan is the only country, and they are doing it with pride. The life of those millions of girls who are not attending the school, when they are 13 or 14, in the last 3 years, they already, a lot of them got married because there's no other job to do, I would say.
Yeah.
There's no other hope to do.
No way of getting fed.
The only sector that they allow the women to work is the health sector. In another year, that we don't have girls graduating from 12 in order to become a doctor. And a lot of female doctors and male doctors left already the country. I think the drained brain is worse than before in Afghanistan this time. Yes, we got the possibility in the last 20 years, a lot of young boys and girls got education. But the amount of the people who live the country, the human resources who live the country, is so huge. And it's irreversible, I think. Because yes, a lot of people saying that we are going back These are young people, and they will have the family, they have children, and so on. Then they cannot go back to Afghanistan because the children cannot adapt back to Afghanistan. That is the truth and the reality. For the girls, when they become a victim of child marriage, you can imagine when they start to bring children when they are at the age of 14 or 13, and they keep producing the children, the number of the population, the increase of poverty, the risk for mother and child mortality is much, much high. They do not have access to proper reproductive rights because of, again, a lot of females have left the country, and because of the reduction of resources on those issues. And also the mortality rate of the mother and child increase because of that. And there's another issues that not a proper research done on it. It's a lot of premature babies because the girls are so young. And that 3 years that they lost without education, the one who did not marry, who can give them back? With those girls in the family, if the mother is a working mother, educated one, they are all in depression. But the mother who is not educated, they're also suffering with at least they are crying together with the girls. Because they lost the livelihood. They have seen in the last 20 years the possibility to get education, to become a doctor and nurse or engineer or a teacher. That is lost. And the hope is lost. When the hope is lost, the psychological, the depression among this young generation, what will be the case? With the boys' education, it's the radicalization of the boys and establishment of those madrasas. They proudly announce that how many madrasas they have. A whole generation of Afghanistan would be Taliban. And it's one point that I would like to remind everyone here. It will not stay in Afghanistan boundary.
It never does, as we've seen historically, which is why I don't really understand why this situation is permitted to prevail. Is it just because the world is run by men who don't get it? What are the feminist voices that we heard in 2001, like Laura Bush? Remember, Laura Bush and Hillary Clinton were quite vocal as the United States was preparing its punitive invasion of Afghanistan following the 9/11 attacks. Laura Bush and Hillary Clinton came out and said that, part of the reason, a large part of the reason that this is going to happen is for the women of Afghanistan. So where are those voices now, do you think?
Well, once in a while they are talking and they are coming up with some of the program and some speeches. But I think in general, the politics of most of the countries are more important than the life of the people in Afghanistan. That is reality. That is not only, we see worse conflicts around us these days. But in none of those conflicts, there is specific gender sensitive programs are going on. Look at the Ukraine, which people keep saying it's a Western country, so-called democratic country. First thing they did, they said the women and children should leave the country, and then the men should stay behind to fight. So the war is a men business. No matter how sensitive and gender sensitive person is that, but at the end of the day, it's a main politics. It's a main idea. It's a men vision to look at the different conflicts.
I think it could be argued that that's been the case throughout history for millennia. Men make war, and women and children suffer from war and the fallout from war. But what I don't understand is that these days in the West, there are very many powerful women whose voices are not being raised because we know that what happens in Afghanistan doesn't stay in Afghanistan. American women are also watching the politicization and erosion of their reproductive rights, for instance, and they're watching it with horror. But I would argue that what's happening to women in Afghanistan enables the erosion of rights of women worldwide, because it normalizes to some extent the rollback and attitudes, and I just don't understand. Maybe this is something you've thought about. You're in America. Why it is that there are no louder voices, feminist voices, women's voices speaking out against what's happening in Afghanistan, that we can also see is starting to creep into Pakistan. Pakistani women, I've just spent some time in Pakistan. Pakistani women are also afraid for the preservation of their own rights. Imran Khan is the most popular politician in Pakistan, and yet he, along with Hamas and Al-Qaeda, congratulated the Taliban on their return to power in Afghanistan, and then said it's not the culture of Afghan people to send their girls to school anyway. And so this normalization of the process, and we're seeing young women being killed for showing their hair when they don't want to be repressed by so-called Islamic clothing rules over there. So there doesn't seem to be any insight or foresight amongst women in the West who do still have their voices to speak out. Why do you think there is a silence? Why is there no to see that what happens to women over there is happening and could certainly happen in a more serious way to me and my daughters?
Yeah, I think that we cannot deny that there are some strong women who continue to raise the voice and continue to work for betterment of women's rights in Afghanistan. But like Feminist Majority Foundation they had the Stop Gender Apartheid campaign in first Taliban round, and they are doing it now as well. But the internal politics is also so time consuming. As you just said, that the reproductive rights in this country or in the other countries. So I think, yes, I believe personally that the female population of humanity should really try hard to take the political power. Because remember, the Taliban become visible or become in power in Kandahar when Benazir Bhutto was the prime minister of Pakistan. So it's Imran Khan, which I think, I don't know exactly, but the people are saying that he's Pashtun himself. It is the politics of that country. I mean, you can see the change of the language in different countries. In here where I'm living in Afghanistan or in Pakistan or in the region in India and China and everywhere else. So the priority is usually their own politics of their country, which is very normal, I think. I keep saying that if you do not feed your own children at home, you don't really think about your neighbor's children. So that is the reality. That is the case. But I believe that the way the world goes, women everywhere has to stand and stand for human rights, for equality, and take the responsibility. you could see the militarization in the world. The amount of the bombs are used, the amount of bombs are made and used. It's all men. The designer, if not 100%, I think it's 99.9% are men.
Yeah. Mm, mm. Yes, this is true. But as you also understand, that glass ceiling doesn't move. Women do try and have tried over the last 100 years to take their place in political life, in policy making, in the running of their own communities and countries, but they're largely kept out. And I saw a recent survey that said women just get tired. They get to a point where they realize that this is exhausting. I'm exhausted. It's not going to work. I'm not going to try anymore. So what is the solution? You just keep banging your head against the ceiling and eventually say, I've got a headache. Time to stop. It's not getting me anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's not impossible if we really take it seriously, because we are the mothers of these men. From the beginning, we have to train our sons. We have to control our son, I would put it this way. So if one time, two time, we find a way how to deal with. So, and that should be done. Number one. Number two, I think we, the women in West or East or South and North, I think we have to come together and get out of this stereotype of our life. Because we say, okay, I have a decent life, so why should I go for making problem? The life is short. It doesn't really work for me to suffer. But we all have to take some kind of a suffering in order to change the world. And think the way that we, at the end of the day, we are all women. And the women in Afghanistan, I keep saying that if women of Afghanistan is just as big as the nail of one of my finger, if it hurts all of my body. So we have to think that way, and we have to take the issue seriously. Like the rape of that medical doctor, the lady doctor in India. I couldn't sleep that night when I saw the news. So we are not safe anywhere. A person who provides cure to everyone. Imagine, in the hospital.
In her place of work, hospital. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, astounding. It really threw the spotlight again on the weaknesses of Indian in South Asian society. But you're saying that it's a responsibility of women to educate their sons. The reason I would suggest that one of the reasons that the Taliban keeps women out of education is because an educated woman will educate her sons that this is not the way to be. And so you take away the cog of education of the woman, of the mother, of the sisters, then you control the mind of the boy.
Exactly.
So,
the source of change.
Yeah.
If the mother is educated, if the mother is not poor, if education and poverty has a close link, we should not go to that SDGs, but yes. And if the mother is educated, she has control on the son.
Yeah.
But
women, go on.
Yeah, and of course it's not everywhere, because in these countries mother are educated, but the son is not always well behaved, I would say. But it is overall norm of societies in the relationship between the humans to have more power, to be superior than the others, and in different ways. So I think if we are united with women, east, west, north, south, if we become together and look at our own ability, what we can do, I think we have to do that, and we have to be in politics. Not always in being in politics is not the only reason to be feminist, but try to be in politics and be feminist as well.
Yeah, and maybe understand the meaning of feminism is to be female. Start from that premise. Women seem to have been central to the justification for atrocity for decades. And you've lived it, observed it, analysed it, fought against it, and you've written about it. Can you explain from your perspective what is the ideological justification for atrocities against human rights and women's rights?
Well, I think in our country, in my country, the justification to use religion and culture is completely wrong, because we are not the only Muslim country, number one. Number two, I think the first message to our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was to iqra, read. So that is what the Taliban does is completely against that. The second point that I would like to mention, that the Mecca is the holiest place for all the Muslims. When you see during the pilgrimage, you see any video or any photo, women and men from all over the Muslim countries, they walk and they pray in Mecca together without even a separation between different countries, let alone between men and women. Or when you can see from Africa, from Asia, from Americas, they are walking together with open face, and they pray together with open face. And in Afghanistan, we are not allowed to have our open face. Who could explain that? So it's not, when you use in any religion, let me put it this way, in any religion, if you want to use it as a political tool, then the first victim is our woman. In any religion so far.
Well, you mention in your book the role of the international community and of the United Nations the first time round during the Taliban's 96 to 2001 time in power. It sounded so much like what's been happening for the past 3 years, the justification of the tolerance for what the Taliban are doing. And we saw it at the last round of talks in Doha. The Taliban said, we're only going if there's no women. Hey, presto, women were excluded from the meeting and the discussion. And you've talked about wrong policy. This seems to me to fit perfectly into that description. What needs to change, and how can the change be encouraged?
I think the world should run by rule of law. When the United Nations is passing any resolution based on human rights, because I believe the guardian of the human rights is the United Nations. So they have to respect their own resolution and rule of laws, the conventions that is passed by the United Nations. And of course, we do understand that the United Nations is political entity. It's representative of different countries. But when they come together to the United Nations and agreed on conventions and rule of laws and resolutions, then they have to be the people who implement it. Even if a country who's a member of the United Nations and violate those conventions or laws or resolutions, the other countries should take collective measures, collective action in order to fix it. Otherwise, it's not really, if there's no rule of law, then you don't expect a better situation or a better world. And no mechanism will protect the human rights of the people in the humanity.
But yes, like you say, rule of law, but the United Nations doesn't even follow its own rules.
Oh, that is the problem. And that's why we have to stand and remind them that you are violating your own rule.
Oh, and
Your own
you are
regulation.
answerable to the taxpayers that fund the organisation and pay very nice salaries to the people who work there. But those reminders don't really seem to make any difference. And we're now 3 years since the Taliban, misogynist, drug dealers, liars, killers, returned to power in a very strategically located and important part of the world.
I think it's not strong enough. The voice is not strong enough. And as I said, that it should not be only Afghan women. It should be all Afghans and the other people who believe on human rights outside of Afghanistan, the people who claim that they are a guardian of the or leading on the human rights.
Yeah, indeed. Well, given the weakness of the putative anti-Taliban opposition and what appears to be a collective failure to come up with an alternative way of governing Afghanistan, and given what is going on there and to the people, and the ideological justification for it, how does it end? How does this? How do we get out of where we are? There doesn't seem to me to be any imagination, or there might be a will, but it doesn't seem to be a collective will, or a will that is geared towards the collective good. How do you think this ends?
Well, I think one thing is that I believe would be when the people of Afghanistan take the future on their own hand, and the international community realize that Afghanistan once again become a problem for them, not only for their own people, because their own people doesn't matter for most of the powers, unfortunately. And I believe that as much power as you have, or as much military operation you could do, but you cannot really silence people forever. What is actually sad in Afghanistan is that it has been the policy of the international community also, that they're looking in Afghanistan for minimal, or just to give you one example, they were saying that, okay, the election in 2000, we had election in 2004 and 2005. They were saying, well, according to Afghanistan standard, the election was free and fair. Yeah. I got angry with the delegation from the EU. I said, what do you mean by Afghan standard? Standard should be standard for everywhere. So the minimal, we want minimal for Afghanistan. Now the Doha 3, when the UN wanted, we want at least Taliban to be on the table.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why we should ask for minimum for people in Afghanistan? Because they are less human than us, or they deserve less peaceful life than us, or something. So there's the minimum requesting for minimum from Afghanistan or in Afghanistan, because it's a poor country, it's a conflict country. But everybody forgot that people from outside were involved in this conflict. That's why we are in this situation, in this, of course, our own people take the actual blame, but everybody else were involved by making Taliban.
Well, the last chapter of your book, and I will hold it up, is called Getting to Next. So what comes next as far as you can see? There we go.
Yeah, I think one is I believe the solution for Afghanistan is quality education for everyone, not only for Afghan, but for everybody. A good quality education based on human rights would be a solution for to save humanity. That is also including environmental disaster, environmental degradation, and all those. And the second point, in my personal view, that people's access to reproductive rights, and particularly women empowerment to be in position to choose the number of their children. I think we are calling for contraception. The contraception is also very much feminized, but I think the scientist also has the responsibility to look at the contraception for both, for men and women, because it's not only the responsibility of women. Thirdly, I think we have to uphold the principle of human rights. Fourth, I believe that people in Afghanistan is part of humanity and they deserve to live with dignity. And we should not forget that is the people in Afghanistan, that is people in Sudan, that is people in Middle East, that is people everywhere. They deserve to live with dignity, and it's a violation of their rights is violation of anybody's rights, I think. It's a violation of humanity, human dignity. And the culture of impunity should stop, I think. Otherwise, the circle continues, the vicious circle, and impunity is fueled, and they make drones, they make bombs, then they kill people wherever they want without any kind of accountability. Killing people, I think, is not the solution for any country.
Forgive me, but you're talking in what sound like deals. I'm wondering whether, and they're ideals that all reasonable human beings who believe in equality and dignity and rights for all would hold. But I'm wondering whether you think a year ahead, 2 years ahead, 5 years ahead, how does the situation that prevails now in Afghanistan and threatens to infect not only the region, but especially for women the world over, how does that end in your view?
I think the main solution, in my personal view, is the people of Afghanistan has to take it seriously. It's the every household's problem when they do not allow girls to go get education or have access to health or to work, or the economy of the country is going really down. It's the people of Afghanistan has to stand and be united and use their civilian disobedient. And I'm giving the example of Bangladesh. The students in Bangladesh remove Hasina after his 15 years of governance. Everything was under her control. And that is the people's power, I believe. So that is one of the solution, and the international community also should take a responsibility to facilitate or to support that.
Indeed. Well, Dr. Sima Samar, thank you so much for your time. I'll hold up your book again, Outspoken, My Fight for Freedom and Human Rights in Afghanistan. I can say that it is a page-turning read. There's lots of lessons in there, and I wish you all the best for its success and the success of your message and the freedom for your country. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. That was Sima Samar. She talked about what life has become for the people of Afghanistan since the Taliban's returned to power. It's even worse, she says, than during their first regime, as they learned a lot in the intervening 20 years. She also talked about the lessons not learned by the international community and the United Nations, and the importance of rule of law, and in the case of the United Nations, following its own rules if things are to change for the better. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. That's all for now. I'm Lynne O'Donnell. Bye-bye.